All right, we are live on YouTube and X. Thank you, Brad Pearce, again. There's actually been one person who's now tied you for the number of appearances on the show. The linguist, whose name I'm forgetting right now, embarrassingly. But yes, he's tied you in number of appearances. So now, well, you've tied him. He surpassed you. You tied him. But we're going to be talking about Wayward Rabbler is your let me bring this up,
Substack.
your what is this website called? Why am I
It's the Wayward
Substack?
Rabbler on Substack, yeah.
Yeah, your Substack. And we're going to be talking about Keir Starmer, who's the PM, Prime Minister of the UK, giving up this British Indian overseas territory to Mauritius, which in the thumbnail I brought up a thing showing how far away it is. It's quite far away from the Chagos Islands, which is very strange.
It's
So
just where the British happened to administer it from.
yeah, okay. And Mauritius is its own country, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so I'll let you intro this, man. Let me know. And if you're in the comments, welcome. And please tell me if our audio leveling is off. It should be good, but let me know if it's not. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Brad.
please let me know how I sound. I'm getting sound through my headphones. I don't know why, but it's fine, for me at least. Anyway, so in short, this is kind of a notorious story among people that are interested in the bad acts of empires, but is really unknown to other people. So these Chagos Islands, they have a very similar, until the 1960s, they have a very similar history to many small uninhabited islands like, the Azores or, anywhere like that. Basically, they were discovered by the Portuguese. They passed, from them to the French to the British. After the Napoleonic Wars, they were uninhabited. They, in this instance, got filled up with coconut trees, and then they brought in slaves originally from East Africa and then from India to populate the islands and work on the coconut plantations.
East African slaves?
Yeah, they're not that far from Africa, so they brought this.
Right. I just didn't know that the British ever got slaves from East Africa, like from the
Actually, the
Horn of
French brought
Africa.
the slaves from East Africa. They're from
Oh,
Mozambique and Madagascar. But yeah, it was
okay,
actually the
okay,
French
that
that
makes
put
more
the
sense.
British there, and then it was the English that brought Indian coolies, as they called them at the time, there later.
Yeah, okay.
So they set up these coconut plantations on basically 3 islands, Diego Garcia and 2 of the northern ones that are much closer to the Maldives. And then, that just went on like that for some time. They were never very profitable. There was never a population of more than 200 people. I think the total landmass thing between all of these islands is 60 square kilometers, if I'm remembering that properly. So it's a very small amount of land over a very wide area. That territory is like 99.87% water. Something.
Right.
So they were set up on these 3 islands, and they kind of formed their own distinct culture. You have to figure they've been there about as long as since, say, like white people settled Australia. But they're not seafaring people. These are not like Polynesians or like the Maldivians that are the descendants of Arab or Indian traders going across the Indian Ocean. So they were basically, they were mostly self-sufficient. They had pigs and chickens, and there's wild mules on the islands, I guess. And they had coconuts in their little farms, and they fished and everything like that. But they were largely at the mercy of the ships coming by. They weren't able to travel long distances themselves. And so this went on for quite some time. Then in the 1960s, with Cold War concerns and the United Kingdom, frankly, getting used to being an American vassal, the United States wanted an island that was uninhabited so that they could put a base on it in the Indian Ocean. They call this base now the Footprint of Freedom, which is pretty cringe-inducing.
Yeah,
and it gives you
seriously
access to basically the Indian subcontinent, the Middle East, and East Africa, within pretty normal range of various modern military equipment.
Yeah, it's like in here. It's a very opportune location for the middle of the ocean for refueling.
Yeah, and any number of things like that. I think they have 30 naval ships there, and a full Air Force base and everything else. They've used it in.
And it's a U.S. base, though, right? It's a U.S. base administered by the UK.
It's technically a joint UK-US base, but there's usually between 10 and 50 UK personnel there, and about 2,000 American personnel. So,
Yeah.
but it is an American base in almost every way, besides that the UK has technical sovereignty over it.
Yeah.
The US
Well, the
paid.
U.S. has technical sovereignty over, well, not technical, but it has sovereignty over the U.K. We own them.
Yeah, right,
Just kidding.
exactly. And they paid them for this in a bizarre way. I don't remember exactly what it is, but they like knocked payments off of some other thing that was going on to, hide the fact they're being paid for it. Anyway, so, at this time, they were still trying to promote the rise, of the UN, of the new international order. It was during the era of decolonization. They were trying to show that they follow rules about non-self-governing territories, about, any number of things like that.
Yeah.
And so they couldn't displace them in the normal way. Like, when the government like builds a dam or something, they force people to move and they buy them, they put them in new homes, they give them job training, they do whatever. The people might be unhappy, but they don't really have a choice. And everyone knows this is happening. They just say, we're eminent domaining you. This is for the greater good or whatever. But because of them trying to follow international, they're trying to not follow international law while pretending they were, in essence, they created this fiction that the people that lived there were temporary contract workers and that they weren't actual residents of the place. So they did a bunch of stuff to threaten them. They poisoned all the dogs on the island with the exhaust fumes from American military aircraft.
Oh, not on purpose, but
no, intentionally.
done.
They intentionally to threaten them. They poisoned all their dogs with the exhaust fume of American military aircraft.
And that must have harmed children as well.
Probably they don't really care. I mean, I don't know exactly how that worked out, but regardless, so they did that, and then they took them to the Seychelles, and then from there they put them in a prison, and then they moved them to Mauritius to basically live in, like disused projects, essentially, because they couldn't pay them reparations for being displaced, because the myth, the lie about it was that they weren't displaced in the first place. So they let Mauritius, get its independence in, I believe, 1965, 68, somewhere in there, with the agreement that they weren't going to be, that they weren't going to get the Chagos Islands. And in spite of this, the Mauritius, tried to claim them right away. They've had various lawsuits. They did pay the islanders who were displaced, some money later, kind of to give up their rights to the island. A UK court ruled they should be allowed to resettle in 2000, but was, overturned at the highest level. And so it's just gone on like this. Mauritius started a new lawsuit in 2010. And, they've just been in various negotiations with them about it. And then finally, Starmer just gave it to them and gave them money to take it. That's the weird part.
Starmer's the Labor Party, right?
Yeah, the new Labor Party government gave them to Mauritius and gave them money for it, like, foreign aid programs to deal with this and that. But they got a 99-year lease on the base. And
right, they paid for it.
Yeah, the islanders, now they're paying rent on it, but the U.S. is not paying rent to the U.K. That's also what's funny about this. So the U.K. is making annual rent payments, but they're not getting reimbursed by the U.S. for it.
Good Lord. And is it a lot, or is it like...
Oh, I think that aspect of it is relatively small, but they're giving them a big general like financial aid package as part of the deal. So in theory, the islanders can resettle on, the Northern Islands, but like this all happened 60 something years ago. No one that has any of the skills to survive on the island is still of an age to do so. They'd have to go like reclaim their house from the jungle, like start everything all over. It's could be really expensive. No, it's not clear that anyone's going to be able to do that. They might make ceremonial trips to clean up the cemeteries or something like that. But yeah, it's really a strange thing, because they gave this up. They want to play this if the status of the base was unsure. By doing this, we ensure that the U.S. gets to keep their presence there. We're all really happy about this. There was a risk of us losing them, and it's like no one's gonna take this base. It's like it's like a Pearl Harbor level defended, and you would have to do Pearl Harbor to take it from the U.S. Like by the time anyone was doing anything that would allow them to take the Chagos Islands from the U.S. and by extension the U.K., the international law wouldn't matter, because you would be full on starting World War III.
Right. And so living there now, I on the Wikipedia page it says 95% British slash American. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, my computer's just being weird. Anyway, yes, and I don't. Oh yeah, there are contractors on the island, and not all of them are British or American. I think they have like they have like some Indian or Filipino or whatever laborers live on the island under military
Right.
contract.
Many such cases.
Yeah.
But but like I guess I'm comparing this to the Falklands, right? Like the Falklands are like overwhelmingly British. Like the British were the first
Yeah.
people to be there. This isn't like that. This was an island that had indigenous people on it, and most of them were moved to Mauritius. Is it
Okay, so
Mauritius?
firstly, Americans were the first people to be on the Falkland Islands, not the British.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, America was a British colony at the time.
Oh, okay. Right.
Regardless, no, I mean it was the Chagos was settled at about the same time as the Falkland Islands. And yeah, no one. It was completely uninhabited when it was discovered by the Portuguese. No humans had ever been there before. In all of history. And so, I mean, the people that live there are native in the sense that you and I are native to the United States. They're not native in the sense of being indigenous, as we would understand it. But I mean, they lived there. They'd been there for like 5 generations.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, but the people that are citizens there, not like military contractors, like how do they feel about this? It seems like they weren't even asked.
Oh yeah, no, they've been very upset for a very long time. So 100% of the population was expelled from this entire island chain before the military set up. But yeah, now there are some civilian personnel, and not 100% of them are American.
Got it. Okay. All right. So if you can for a moment, this is a good question. How does Diego Garcia, which is another name for the island, right?
It is the island the base is on.
Oh, okay. Okay. Counter China's string of pearls in the Indian Ocean and support U.S. alliances. What do we do about war on terror and allies afraid of the rise of China? That is a very good question to me.
This is what all the British people are talking about. I mean, the thing that is crucial to understand about all of this is that the U.S. base is not going anywhere. It's on a 99-year lease. Like, as I say in the article, if Mauritius tries to sign a agreement to let China build a base on these islands or something like that, they are going to need some freedom really quickly. Like, whether it's a full-on invasion, the CIA doing, like a color revolution, the CIA just straight throwing the guy out the window. Like that's simply not happening. But this is what the British conservatives, have everyone worrying about is they're concerned about how, close Mauritius allegedly is to China, though, it's more of an issue where they just have good trade relations and some investment deals and, that sort of thing. It's not really what they're playing it out to be. But in terms of, it's like central in the Indian Ocean in many ways. So in terms of really countering anyone that wants to be an Indian Ocean power, it's of profound importance. It's like an entire maybe sixth of the world that this allows them to project power into.
Yeah.
So it's I mean that can't be downplayed. But once again, it's a farce. Like it isn't a real thing. It's they're just giving up sovereignty over this because they want to make a false point about believing in international law.
Yes. And this is, this is what you shared here. And I agree. Like international good boy points, the Chagos buys them very little because very few people care. And then Israel is way down. Obviously, this is a fake graph, but it's it speaks to what I perceive, at least, to be reality in this situation.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely absurd, and it's the British people. I mean, I think mostly a lot of them feel humiliated, so they're kind of like coming up with reasons why it strategically matters or what have you, because it's you can't really argue that like it being personally embarrassing is the reason that you shouldn't do something as a matter of public policy. Though of course,
right.
When a nation loses confidence in itself, then it tends to fail very quickly.
Right. And you open the article with this. with this very, very important quote from Adam Smith. To propose that Great Britain should voluntarily give up all authority over her colonies would be to propose such a measure as never was and never will be adopted, famous last words, by any nation in the world. No nation ever voluntarily gave up the dominion of any province, how troublesome, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and it's pretty crazy that they're doing it. It's not and you compare this to China later in the article of like giving up Hong Kong, which was a deal that happened, but China is an important trade partner, a large power, whereas Mauritius, am I pronouncing that wrong?
I've been saying, I'm pretty sure it's Mauritius. I can't remember if I properly looked it up before I did this. I find that not a lot of things have a soft T like that when they're in another language, but I guess I'm not sure.
Okay, so Mauritius, however it's pronounced, is like they don't have like a real what is their claim on this island based off of? Is it that the original, like some of the people who were there then got moved to Mauritius?
No, it's much dumber than that. Their entire claim on it is that when Mauritius was a British territory, it was part of the territory in the sense that it was administered from there. But they agreed to not pursue the claim when they were granted independence, and then they immediately started pursuing the claim, basically. So no one from Mauritius has anything to do with this island besides the, small population of Chagosians in that country that they've never wanted there, that they've always found to be, an annoyance, which is part of why a lot of them want to be, given a status more like the Falkland Islands or something still under British sovereignty, especially because, most of them have been given British citizenship because they were kind of like stateless. That's part of the agreement that they made later.
Yeah.
And, they were British.
Are they going to lose that now?
What?
Are they going to lose that British citizenship now, or is it not going to be given to future children?
What happened is that it was only given to ones that were born between 65 and 82 or something like that, because the ones that were born before that were British subjects in the first place.
Right.
And then, probably these people, their total diaspora is like 10,000 people now. And, maybe over half of them live in the United Kingdom currently.
Yeah. But
and so,
UK laws would give the citizenship to the children of British nationals.
Yeah,
even if
the Chagosians, I can't emphasize this strongly enough, had literally no place in this negotiation. They were not consulted. They were not asked. They didn't have they did not have anything to do with it. And they do have like activist organizations or any number of things that you could count as their maybe not a government in exile, but regardless, they have like community leaders you could talk to or whatever if you were so inclined.
But they didn't. They just care of the optics of giving it up to, I guess, a non-European, non-Anglosphere nation.
Yeah, exactly. And
so many cases of this, man.
Yeah, it's absolutely
very disappointing.
Ridiculous. And so the people on this island, had nothing to do with it. What I did find interesting is that when they had a vote on it, there were only like 6 in favor of the UK's claim. When they weren't giving it up before. One of them was the Maldives, and I didn't see exactly why, but like the only country that kind of like actually has the skill and the proximity to do anything with these islands is the Maldives, because they actually already live on these tiny little atolls. The Seychelles, potentially as well, but the Maldives really are the closest one that would actually make sense if you wanted to incorporate them in some way that they were actually able to settle the people there and make some use of them.
And that's a larger population.
Yeah, I don't remember just how many people live there, but at the same time though, the reason that their country works to whatever extent is because the islands are really close and you can move, like there's a ton of small, all of them are small, but there's like a ton of them.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and they have a lot of tourism money in the Seychelles and in the Maldives.
Yeah, there's not any evidence that Mauritius has the funds or the ability or anything to settle these islands or make any good use of them. In theory, I think they had the fishing rights before in a technical sense, but they weren't being allowed to use them. So, technically they could make this tropical paradise open to commercial fishing and oil exploration. That's kind of, that must be kind of their angle here because it's the only thing that makes any sense.
Yeah. And Siaba is talking here. How has Diego Garcia's isolated location enhanced its role in surveillance, intelligence gathering, and supporting special operations and counterterrorism efforts during the war on terror? And he's left a number of comments here. Yeah.
I mean, they use it for all this. Once again, I'm not. I mean, yeah. If you believe in the general premise of the United States needing to be able to project global power, it's of utmost importance. And so, I mean,
Right.
that's what like the Biden administration, et cetera, is claiming is like, oh, this puts us on firmer legal foundation. It's like, okay, well, once again, no one is taking away this place that has 30 naval ships and a full like Air Force base on it. Like that's not
Right.
realistic unless they're starting a huge war anyway. But yeah, it's been used extensively in
And it's too
the
far
war
away
on
from
terror
China
and
for China to
overthrowing
care.
Libya. It was a scandal that they stopped some rendition flights there. It was a scandal in the UK. It didn't matter in the US, but it was a scandal that they stopped some like CIA rendition flights there in like 2009. So it's been used. I mean, they use it. Like there's no denying that. I mean, it even has a deep space monitoring station on the island as well. There's nothing else around it, and it's in a unique location.
This is so weird, dude. It's such a small, like it seems like it's so
Yeah, and
significant.
show them this thing from the introduction booklet. That looks like
This
it would be
one?
20 years old based on the quality of Photoshop, but there's a rainbow flag waving, so you know that it is from much more recent than that.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure is. That's a Filipino flag right there,
I don't think it
isn't it?
is. Oh no, it's the one under. It's the one under. It's a rainbow flag. Sorry, I
Yeah,
looked at it.
that's a rainbow flag. That's a Filipino flag. And then that's the flag of the islands.
And yeah, yeah, I don't think that is a Filipino flag, but I think it's the. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's something. I don't know why there would be actually, but they use Filipino sailors for a lot of things. Regardless, what I
Looks
noticed
like a
was the
flag.
rainbow flag, which means that
Yeah.
is a much more recent picture than you would think, based on the fact that it looks like a 2000, year 2000 Photoshop job.
Yeah, this is bad. This is bad. Like it's crazy. Yeah, it was probably made by some naval intern. I can't get past community organizers. Um, yeah, dude. So this is so strange because it's now being said that Joe Biden pressured them into making this deal. Why?
I mean, that's what they're claiming. I mean, once again, the issue. So basically, Labor government or the Tories started having serious negotiations about this in 2019, though they said it was under the premise that they were never giving up sovereignty. So I don't know what they were even negotiating. But and they said that they were never going to do it. Everyone, like Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and one other person whose name I'm blanking on, all blame each other for their role in this happening. And then
It's like the
the
meme of the pointing
the
fingers.
labor claim is that they inherited a mess and that their hand was forced, but which once again that's on its face nonsense. And it's not like the UK has any problem with voting against the entire so-called voting with only like 5 people if it relates to Israel or Ukraine or something like that. They
Right.
just I don't know. They just decided to use this to make a transparently false point.
This is so strange. Like it feels like we're missing some sort of very important information. Yeah, can I just play this video here?
Sure.
Born on Diego Garcia. This lady here, she's my great grand aunt. She's my grandfather's sister. She was born on Pearce banners. Today, the Labour government has robbed us of our right to decide of our future. We got Philip San, who is trying to erase our identity by calling us Mauritian. We are not Mauritian. We are Chagosian. We have a right to decide. Labour government, give us our right back to decide of our future.
He's got a very interesting accent. It's like a mix of like it's almost a mix of like African but Pacific Islander and British, and almost
Yeah, I mean, there
Australian
is
in a
what's
way. It's
called like, I mean, they call it Chagosian Creole or whatever because,
Mhm.
yeah, they were originally governed by the French, but then they had people from Mozambique there, and then they had, yeah, they had the Indians come in. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you can ask the linguist about this. I don't understand
Yeah,
exactly how island accents all end up sounding kind of like that, but
yeah,
it
yeah.
happens one way or another.
Right. It's But like they're saying here, like they want to decide for themselves, like self-determination, which I think is the thing that makes the most sense. But instead, it's being decided by these larger powers. And he said it. We're not Mauritian. That's what he said. So
Yeah, well,
like,
and Mauritia has treated them badly the entire time. It's
I
they
bet they
kind of got
have.
dumped there, and they haven't wanted them there at all. So they there's no love towards them anyway, and they're British subjects in the first place. Their ideal situation is definitely being managed like the Falklands or Pitcairn's Isle or something. What I also mentioned here that's kind of crazy is that the U.S. doesn't even use the part of Diego Garcia that they mainly used to live on. It's like a ghost town on the other side of the atoll, and it's actually, if you were to walk along the ring of it, it's like 12 miles away or something. Though it's, if you were to go across the lagoon, it's much closer. It is by that deep sea or the deep space monitoring station or whatever. But regardless, they didn't even necessarily need to totally displace them to do this. They could have left them there, as I say in this, to like buy coconuts from and use their daughters as prostitutes or whatever.
yeah.
I
Unfortunately,
mean, it says in the documentary
Yeah.
about it. So John Pilger made a really famous documentary about this that I have on the top. It talks about how that's what like all of the women had to turn to when they were abandoned on Mauritius with no skills and no money. It's kind of what happened anyway. But I mean,
Yeah.
also like they need, legitimately do need, janitors, and they have all these contractors that are there now. There's any
and
number.
instead they're bringing people in from like far away. The Philippines and India, like Philippines is very far away. India is still pretty
don't
far
know
away.
exactly the makeup of all the people that they have there, but if you go, I use Google Maps really, really heavily when I write, and one of the funny things is you look at the reviews of stuff like this, and of course with military bases, some of them are always like jokers or whatever, and sometimes in obscure locations there are screw ups, But a fair amount of the people that were actually leaving reviews of the stuff on the island, of either the natural stuff or things like that, they were, people that were there as workers, and
It's a very interesting way to find out like who's there is looking at the Google reviews.
Yeah, well, you see the people that take pictures as well. So they've been there. They have a picture. They're talking about what they were doing there. Any number of things. You can find out an incredible amount of stuff on Google Maps.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like Abu Sayyaf and the Malte group, I've actually never heard of that, which pledged allegiance to ISIS, while direct mentions of Diego Garcia supporting Philippine operations might be sparse. Yeah, and there are a lot of war on terror. I don't know why it would be supporting Philippine operations. It's much farther away from the Philippines, but I guess this is like a military guy, so I think that's where he's coming from with this.
I mean, once again, this base is used for a lot of stuff. It is really crucial to, kind of the ability of U.S. power to operate throughout a very large area. It's one of the only places in the world that can reload nuclear submarines, like the warheads on nuclear submarines. It does all sorts of stuff. And once again,
so strategically important, and yet not important for anything else.
They got exactly. It really is. They got the 99-year lease. So, the base is not going anywhere, but it wasn't going anywhere anyway, because, literally the only countries that could possibly seriously threaten this are, Russia or China, and they would have to do a full-on, like, Pearl Harbor type attack, and it would be like World War III anyway. So once again, international law wouldn't actually matter because you would just then be in a full-scale war.
Right. But the thing is that, like, allowing the rest of the island to be administered by someone else, it kind of makes you lose your ability to accurately, like, gather intelligence of the rest of the island. So, like, somebody could kind of set up and plan for an attack on the base if, like, that's not going to happen today, obviously, but, like, decades down the line, if the situation changes, this base is so remote that it would take a while. Like the 13th Mu that operates out of Japan is very, very far away from this place. It normally operates within the South China Sea, around Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asia. It's thousands of miles away from this location.
This isn't that far from our bases, like on the Arabian Peninsula and stuff like that, though.
Oh, no. Yeah, you're right. It would come from the East Coast Muse, actually.
Anyway,
Okay, I see.
regardless, the island, once again, the whole island of Diego Garcia, the U.S. is maintaining control of. The two islands that were inhabited before are about 140 kilometers away. Maybe it was 140 miles, I think.
Yeah.
Regardless, they're still pretty far away. And, there's not anything currently that you could even really dock a large ship on. So, you'd have to be watching them build all this. The bigger concern is that Mauritius will give the Chinese, that this is the most reasonable of all the concerns, is that Mauritius will give China like fishing rights, and that then they'll use the ships as like listening stations or whatever. That could actually plausibly happen. What's not going to happen is them like building up a naval base on one of the other islands without the U.S. stopping them.
Yeah. Gosh, this is so stupid. So absolutely self-destructive.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it speaks to like the soft power of like the ideological I guess wokeness almost of like but surface level. It's like many things with this. It's like land acknowledgements.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what it made me think of too.
Right. It's like soft power, but the land acknowledgement is always performed in a entirely superficial way, just like it is here. Like this has it doesn't help the actual Chagosian people, and people don't care because there's only like 10,000 of them. Gosh, this is just depressing, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, the story. So, I mean, that John Pilger documentary is really depressing, and it's famous. Like I said, this is the displacement of the Chagosians is a really famous episode among people who like are interested in stories of empires behaving badly, basically, because it is really sad. They're really sympathetic. I mean, as I said this in the article, so like you take like World War II, for example, and you talk about like the firebombing of Japan, or the bombing of Dresden, or anything like that, and it's like
the bombing and the strafing of a children's choir performed by American fighters, by the way, which is insane.
Well, yeah, that's even worse. But yeah, regardless, you look at something like this, and you're like, well, yeah, I mean, those are civilians, but I mean, probably a lot of them do support their government. They are, by doing their jobs, they're part of the war machine. They're part of this society that as a whole we're at war with. So maybe it's bad, but they still are kind of in the mix of this, if you will. Their sons are probably in the army. They're raising more sons that will be in the future. Anything like that. The Chagosians were basically just like selling coconuts to passing ships when they got caught up in this Cold War struggle that they had literally nothing to do with, which is what makes them so sympathetic as victims. Because usually you can always find, like if you want to, you can find some fault in the people that, get the bad end of something like this. Like, we had a treaty with this Indian tribe, and then they killed someone who was out hunting, or I don't know. You can usually always find something, but they're like, it's a rare situation where they are completely blameless for this happening to them. Like it was all decided far away without any of their knowledge. They had absolutely nothing to do with the international events that were going on. They were just in this tiny little island paradise on their little farms selling coconuts to ships that came by periodically.
Yeah, dude. This sucks. Okay. What else do you want to share from this article about this? Or did you get through most of it?
I'm trying to remember if there's anything, more specific about it that I really wanted to get into. I mean, once again, the part that left just the biggest impression on me, as I said, is just the overwhelming stupidity of the entire situation. And, it does leave me wondering where the UK goes from here, because, immediately people are like, oh, are they going to give back Gibraltar? Are they going to give back the Falklands?
Oh, God, Gibraltar would be terrible.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be a truly insane thing to do. But, I mean, it's true. Argentina has no meaningful claim to the Falklands besides that it happens to be close to them.
Right. But it seems like Mauritius has no claim.
No, it doesn't at all. I don't necessarily want to take this. So, what the Falkland Islanders have going for them is that they're British in some identifiable sense, not just specifically that they're white, but that they actually have meaningful relations with the home island, whereas these people were just, like most British people didn't even know about this random atoll that they owned or whatever, when it happened. But at the same time, they did do have I don't remember what it was. It was like the British government made a documentary about the people on the island in 1955, talking about how they had been living there for 150 years. Like John Pilger found the footage of it from it. And then 10 years later, they're like, oh, no one ever actually lived there. But yeah, it's I don't know. People are worried about that as they, are giving away their last bits. The Falkland Islands aren't actually that strategically important in the same sense because, the UK doesn't have anything going on down there, really.
Right.
Gibraltar.
But it is important for the Falkland Islands because those are British people. I mean, they're descended from British people.
Subjects. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I didn't know I didn't know they were like Americans, like British colonial Americans, but that makes them British. Like,
well, no, I mean, most of the people that actually live there now are descendants of the British. It was the Americans set up a whaling trading post there. And that's what made it available to be colonized, because there were people on the island that had supplies, and people started stopping there. And, it's similar to, I don't know how the Cape of Good Hope got colonized after they set up a trade station there. It's like that sort of thing.
Right. There were actually people probably from my hometown on the Falklands, because like I'm from like a whaling city in Connecticut. That's interesting.
I mean, it wasn't Gibraltar? That many people, but the British weren't whaling down in the South Seas down there yet at the time. It was like the Americans that were doing the primary whaling down there. Yeah. So regardless, I mean, and then, Gibraltar, the British captured that in like 1650 or something. I might not have the year completely correct, but, they've owned it for a very long time. And the Spanish have always hated that, like very, very much hated that. There's been times where it was functionally under siege for, decades at a time, and no traffic was allowed to pass between, there and the rest of Spain. It's like an amazing natural fortress. But, so they claim they're going to hang on to these, but at the same time, like what does a former world power need to be able to project power globally for?
Yeah.
It's the America needs it. Like America needs our vassal to have it is, why these things actually matter in a global sense.
Right. But Gibraltar into the Mediterranean, that's still quite important for the UK as a regional power, not necessarily a world power. Yeah. And it's important for this is important for a nation's prestige, essentially, which is an incalculable thing. But, this must be a huge hit for morale amongst the British. That's like losing this. And it sets up a very bad precedent for the future. But yes, everybody, by the way, there's a link to Brad's Substack in the description. Please check it out. Very good stuff.
Very kind.
Yeah, mostly geopolitics, and that's down below. Link to his article, and you can subscribe to it there. And you do a podcast every Tuesday?
The day varies. Usually it comes out around midnight between Monday and Tuesday, but it's not on a truly fixed schedule.
Yeah, imagine the Spanish hating the English. I'm shocked. Yes, long history of that. I
mean, their economy is like completely dependent on English tourism, but they also hate the English tourists.
Right. It really is. Beautiful country to visit, by the way. It's not commonly visited by Americans. It's very common for the English to go to, and a lot of them even retire there.
Okay, so regarding this question this guy has, once again, so the only reason Mauritius has a claim is because it was administered under the from there by the British, and technically the rules, the international law about decolonization kind of said that you're not supposed to split up countries before you give them independence, essentially. So even though they claimed it was uninhabited, which we know was a lie, they weren't supposed to take them away before doing that. But I'm saying that's a nonsense rule, in my opinion. And, the French split up their colonies before giving them independence, but they had like plebiscites in all of them. So that must be why that was allowed. But yeah, if you were the country that reasonably could incorporate them is the Maldives. But yeah, it's not good for anything but the military base. And then the Chagosians, it was their home. So they're not thinking about it in terms of what empire is it useful to. They're thinking like, hey, we used to live on this beautiful tropical island, in our huts with our coconut trees. And now we live in a slum on a different island that's less tropical, basically.
And administered by people who are not their own people, which sucks.
Yeah, the British weren't really their own people either, but, the British didn't do a lot of administering there. They had, like, a plantation manager and then went to check on it once every 2 years or something, probably.
Yeah. Gosh, this sucks, man. Like it absolutely just sucks. That's all I can say. I keep saying that.
Yeah, they really got screwed. And like once again, like I said, if they didn't have to have this lie, this initial original sin of all of this, they could have, for a country the size of Britain and it only being 2,000 people, they very easily could have set them up with somewhere nice to live, possibly even, resettled them all together somewhere, given them a good cash settlement, given them career training, and, got them set up fine. And they might still be annoyed that they don't have their, home, but they wouldn't have got screwed over like they did. But they couldn't admit, they had to lie about the fact that they were a harmed party. So they didn't do anything. And, in 1981, they gave them $3,000 each to renounce their claim to the island, but they were illiterate. They couldn't read English. So they basically all just got tricked into putting a thumbprint on the piece of paper.
Oh, that's like 19th century stuff, man. That's embarrassing.
It's really bad. It's like I said, it's a very depressing story. I strongly recommend that John Pilger documentary. It's called Stealing a Nation. And incidentally, like I usually hate when people talk about, I wrote a whole long article about how, Americans didn't steal, America from the natives. We conquered it. In this instance, they pretty much did just straight steal it. They kind of deceived them onto boats and then, never let them return.
Yeah.
They deceived them on the boats and never let them return. Like it's a pretty clear example of they kind of did straight steal the island from them.
Yeah, and the squid brings up a good point. The U.S., talking about Bikini Atoll, the U.S. government displaced an entire island that had legitimate natives on it because they wanted to blow it up. And I think the Bikini Atoll flag is like a reference to this. And there has not been any sort of, as far as I know, any sort of like reparations in any way. But
they just have going for them that they're part of like a broader Polynesian culture, whereas like the Chagosians are truly unique and have no other brethren. They did get totally screwed on Bikini Atoll, but they were able to, move to another island, and then of course it's actually that's an interesting one because usually America destroys your country and then 20 years later makes a movie about how it made them sad. In the case of Bikini Atoll, America blew up their entire island and then 50 years later made a cartoon about how it mutated the animals at the bottom of the sea by it.
They did.
What do you think SpongeBob's about? They live in Bikini Bottom and they're all talking animals under the sea?
Oh no. Oh no, dude.
Yeah, that's like the premise of SpongeBob. I don't know if they've ever admitted that is the idea of the show, but think about it for a second.
That's my headcanon now.
Yeah.
I thought that Bikini Bottom came from SpongeBob originally intending to be an adult cartoon though. So it's called Bikini Bottom as in like an adult joke about bikini bottoms and then like characters like Sandy Cheeks. And then Mr. Krabs is like crabs. But I don't know if that's confirmed either.
I don't know. You can believe whatever you want, but think about it. It's called Bikini Bottom and all of the animals are like mutated.
Right. There's a lot of theories about SpongeBob, by the way, on the internet that I've watched. I watch a lot of YouTube because I make
my
YouTube
wife
videos
watches
now.
a lot of stuff like that too.
Yeah, there's some very interesting theories like that. Like that Mr. Krabs killed Pearl's mother, and Krabby Patties are whale meat, and he's raising Pearl to replace his mother because that's what he was feeding. But that's another conversation. Yes, I agree, Blue Frost. I love America. Our government is another thing. Yes. If you love America, you should not love the government, in my opinion.
I do want to just say one other thing that is absurd about this that I mentioned in this briefly is, they make this whole deal about, the UK doesn't want to deal with the pressures being an international pariah, this and that. So, we're going to come to this agreement to give this to Mauritius. Like, I assure you that if they would have waited for Trump to get elected, he would have bought the Chagos Islands from them straight cash, like one way or another would have found a way to pay for it. And then it at least wouldn't have been humiliating in the same way. Cause like, you can sell like an island you don't need. That's not embarrassing. People do that all the time as opposed to paying someone to take it from you.
Right. But this seems so insignificant. Like I didn't even hear about it until you brought it up. But like, it's so the only people that this really matters to, I guess it matters to Mauritius for some reason, but it
British
really
nationalists.
Right. It matters to British nationalists and the Chagosian Islanders, but the Chagosian Islanders got screwed again. So
Yeah,
like,
the British nationalists all acknowledge that the Chagosians keep getting screwed, and they're like, no, we should have done this in a way that actually, helped them while we retained
right.
sovereignty to the island.
Seriously, like that's perfect. It's crazy that the British nationalists are the ones who are supporting the indigenous people the most. I mean, maybe just in a union of like of it serves their interests the best, but also like I think that there's a level of legitimacy to that even amongst nationalists. Damn. Damn. This is an interesting point. Do you know that Agalega Island in Mauritius is planned to have an Indian military base soon?
No, when I was looking at the maps for this, I only saw one second island in there, and I don't remember if that's what it was called. If that's the one that's just the second one that's smaller and to the east. But I did not hear anything about that when I was working on this. It's interesting you should say that, though, because what everyone is so worried about is their ties to China, which no one, I don't know. I didn't see anyone make a compelling case that they have any interest in making any more deals with China. It's like anyone else where China has cheap goods. They're a moderately, by African standards, which they're technically considered, they're a really prosperous country. But like in general, they're a moderate, they're like a middle income country, but they're in the middle of nowhere. So, you need good relations with China because they're the ones that have like goods you can buy. They're the ones that are interested in doing infrastructure projects. Chinese tourism is an increasingly big business, though British specifically has a lot of British honeymoon tourism. That's the other funny thing is like the UK, I mentioned in the article that what them saying that they had to make this deal because they were under pressure. It reminds me of on Seinfeld when Kramer is taking karate with the children, and Jerry's like, you don't even need karate, you could just wring his neck. Like it would take them, like they could basically just stop British people from traveling to Mauritius for their honeymoons, and their economy would collapse. Not to mention just sending like their one aircraft carrier to circle the island like one time. It's crazy.
Yeah. And this China having like some sort of plans for the Chagos Islands makes no sense to me based on what I know about Chinese like imperial policy. China is much more interested in islands that are directly around them, like Taiwan or Formosa, I guess, like the Philippines. Like they're interested in this area. Right here, like this area. This is way far away from Chinese sovereignty. They might have interest.
Ever it's a case of projection.
Right. Projection, but not like immediate control.
No, I mean, I don't mean projecting power. I mean projection in the sense that Anglo-American powers always think that everyone else is going to think like them. But in fact, the Chinese actually think very differently than they do. They
do. China seems to just want control over their historic tributary system. They want control over Formosa because they've had control over it forever,
and because it claims to be the legitimate government of China,
right? And always has. The current government of China never relinquished that claim from the moment they started, and the nationalists fled to Formosa and formed the Republic of China
and massacred the natives, by the way, which most Americans still don't know.
The Austronesian natives, who are more related. That's like where Polynesians came from, like 10,000 years ago.
That's where the Polynesians started out. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. I should say that. That's not entirely set in stone, but that seems to be it.
Seems it's plausible, at least.
Mm-hmm. It's the most plausible. But yeah, the Austronesians are a minority indigenous population today, and their colonialism has lasted like 400, 500 years or something.
Yeah, because the Japanese controlled it for a long time before, too.
Right. But China really just wants this. They don't. And it's like with Formosa, with Taiwan. It's right. It's like it's Mexico's. It's China's Gulf of Mexico. This South China Sea. It's called the South China Sea for a reason. Whereas this is so far away. I think you're onto something with the projection there. Because China does not act like the United States and the UK. They just don't. They don't have.
And I mean, they have thousands of years of history where it is possible to see how they've acted in the past.
Right.
And once again, none of this is to say that China is some sort of like benign, harmless power that you don't need to worry about. They're certainly not.
Right.
And I will say that even people that are of like libertarian sentiment or whatever, they say like, oh, libertarians that live in America, they do get wrong how much fear of China there is in like Thailand and Vietnam and Korea and stuff like that.
Especially Vietnam.
Yeah,
Vietnam hates China. They've been invaded by China like 20 times.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, I mean, at the same time, that doesn't mean it's our responsibility to protect any of those countries from China.
Right.
But regardless, they do have neighbors that are, prefer us there as the distant power that is somewhat nicer to them than China being the hegemon or whatever. But at the same time, the U.S. loses its mind when, Tuvalu decides to contract out its police force to China because, they only need 5 of them anyway or whatever. Like,
right.
It's, but it's
bad place to contract
difficult.
Your police, by the way.
Yeah. It's very difficult for, the Anglo-American power. You have to, something that people don't understand actually is that geopolitics is not really it's always hard to phrase this. It's not really like an inherent reality of relations between states. It's a specific ideology that was formulated in England like 200 years ago based on the idea that, what they call the global pivot in Central Asia is the key to control the world, and that there's, a permanent Anglo-Russian, conflict over it, or Anglo-Chinese or whatever. So, and you look at the Chagos in relation to this, the access it gives you to South Asia and to, to all the areas that are peripheral to that. And so, it's just they think of this a certain way, and you'll see. I think both Russia and China struggle to understand, how obsessed the Anglos remain with this. But it's like 200 years of faulty scholarship has just drilled this into the head of almost everyone who works in who's a specialist in international relations and is not a complete dissident. So they, I don't know, they can't see it any other way. I mean, and I will say that at the very least, like when they made that up, it was total nonsense. At least there's now there's Caspian Sea basin oil. So there's at least some valuable resource there to, to care about. When they came up with this idea, it was completely worthless.
Yeah. Yeah. And all stemming from projection. Right, really, because it's the idea of this being like a strategically important location.
Yeah, of Central Asia being the key to global domination. I mean, and undeniably, the Russians were expanding there pretty rapidly at the time that the British were trying to come up from India. But at the same time, Russia was they were like colonizing in kind of a normal expansion pattern, of making an ever larger land empire. And, sure, I guess they would have loved, access to the sea from there or whatever. But regardless, there's among, very serious people or what have you that deal with this sort of thing, there just remains an absolute obsession with this ideology of geopolitics. And they can only see things one way. And it's not, it's fallacious, but it's very much also just not an inherent truth to, what the interests of states are. It's just an ideology they believe in.
Oh gosh. So what do you think happens now? Like, is this going to become like another wave of decolonization of these small, relatively insignificant islands? Like, I kind of thought that these places were done. Like their international status was kind of set in stone as British and French overseas territories. A lot of these islands in like Micronesia, going to the other side of Australia, they're like, some of them by the French are considered like core French territory.
Oh, the French will straight up deploy troops there if they have to.
Right.
But the core French
That's the difference of French and English.
Yeah, the core French territories are like Martinique, Guadeloupe, Guyana, and then there's Reunion and Mayotte and see, one of those is the same thing that they said the British aren't allowed to do. Like they had a vote on independence for the Comoros, I believe it is. And the one island that they had administered from voted against independence. So they did the same thing as the British with North Ireland, where they're like, okay, well, we said this was one vote, yes or no, but we're keeping the territory that voted to stay with us, instead of, counting it as a whole. But, the French, they have like French Polynesia. They have, that other island I wrote off. I'm suddenly blanking on the name off the coast of Australia. That's quite large. New Caledonia. They have, a lot of things like that. But yeah, the French, I don't think, are giving up anything. They're really struggling in Africa, but of the territories that they own,
Right.
France is more than, France has deployed its military to more places in the post World War II era than any country but the United States.
Right. They've done it a lot in Africa.
Yeah, as of
Libya, I think
2016, it
most
was
recently.
51 times they had deployed troops to the African continent. And I mean, those are separate conflicts, obviously. That's not just like switching out people on your base or whatever.
Right. Yeah, the French seem to have not lost their nationalism in the modern era, in a lot of ways, including like, in social issues within France. I think they banned the hijab in government buildings,
They
which
fight
seems
about that all the
crazy.
time. I don't remember exactly what the policy landed on that, but yeah, it has to do with a lot of secularism. They I don't think you're allowed to wear it in schools, but yeah, they've really gone back and forth on that, and some of the policies have been local. So I
Mhm.
don't know exactly where they stand on that, but yeah, the French hate headscarves for sure.
Yeah, they do. So are we just going to do an hour here today? You got to go?
That would be fine. I mean, I could go a little bit longer if you have anything specific to talk about, but I do feel like we've covered the article pretty well.
Yeah. So at the end here, why don't you talk broadly about the other work that you do in your
Okay.
podcast?
Okay. So like at the end as in now?
Yeah, unless you have more to say on this. We can
No,
go longer if you want. I
no,
just
I
know
think
you
we mostly
normally go
covered
an hour.
everything that I was the most interested in.
Sweet.
Anyway, so yeah, I write the Substack that is the Wayward Rabbler. I have a newborn, as I think you might have been able to hear in the background through some of
Yeah,
this.
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. So I'm not getting the articles out quite as fast as I used to.
Yeah, but your articles are very good, and they're very
And a
in
lot of them are
depth.
very long too. So it's it's not necessarily something that it makes sense to write one each week.
And they're
Anyway,
on international politics, like geopolitics in regions that we don't normally have discussed, which
yeah,
is
I mean
why
a
I
lot
love it so much.
more of them recently, of course, have been about the U.S. election because it's what's been going on.
Mhm.
But I mean, I sometimes do well at getting into the depth of, especially like what's wrong with Democrats, because that's really hard to understand what's going on in the head of the modern American liberal, Anyway, so I write this, and then we have a podcast, my wife and I do, that is called Dispatches from Clown World. And that is usually the format is that we have one main topic that we discuss for a half hour to 45 minutes. And then we go over a list of other ridiculous things that, have happened for another half hour to 45 minutes or so. And I don't know, people seem to like it. I am much more of a writer than a podcaster, but it is a good chance to talk about many things that, interest me that are not substantial enough for me to do a full, article on or that sort of thing. And then I'm also writing for the Libertarian Institute, which I need to try to do as soon as I get off this podcast. And I'm there. It's usually I've been doing about 2 articles a month for them. And I have been writing book reviews for the American Conservative. I just started doing that. And then they just fired their editor. So the future of everyone at the magazine is uncertain right now.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything besides that they're changing. They haven't even said who their new editor is yet. So regardless, I am in this the current issue of the American Conservative as well.
Right.
And
Didn't you also write for the forgetting what that's called, the Libertarian?
The Libertarian Institute. That's what I was just saying. I write for them still regularly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And so then, I mean, and also, I don't know if anyone's in this industry. I am looking for more places to write for, hopefully that pay decently and, either have ideas for they want me to write or accept things from, a broad range of topics. So that is mostly what I do. And then also I'm on Twitter at Wayward Rabbler. That is the best place to see me. I do a fair amount of threads that are like kind of analyzing news stories, like, when a big report comes out from the, say like New York Times or Washington Post, it's usually completely full of bullshit. And other people find it difficult to, read an article and really get in between the lines of what they're saying and, or sometimes just deal with being propagandized out of that way in the first place. So I write a fair amount of threads that are explaining the biggest news stories that, and what the government is trying to make us believe by spreading those stories and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Okay. And then we have We have a question from JC. What does Brad think about the growing sentiment on the right that the U.S. needs to intervene in Africa more to colonize it, I guess, for resources, or else China will?
I don't know if I see that as if I really experience that as a growing sentiment on the right. What I do see more of is people that want to get completely out. But you do have an increasing amount of, it's partially generated by backlash, but you do have like an increasing amount of, open racism where people believe that developing Africa is completely hopeless. And you do also similarly see people say that, this by extension means that colonialism, should come back there. It should never have been given up. Which is, there's a few things wrong with that. I would say the biggest one is that the Portuguese were willing to completely fight for their colonies and still lost. So there's not any evidence that it would have gone different for anyone else, if they would have fought for them, because in a long enough timeline, it's not possible to govern a large amount of people with like 2% of the population that they have. It's just not viable.
Right.
Anyway, as far as countering China there, I definitely think the risks of China there are completely overplayed. China is clearly the most interested in doing business and making money. They're not that deeply influencing the governments there. They're honestly probably the least malign of the three major powers on the African continent. I would say, though, there's not good data. There's not actually good public polling data about really anything from Africa, but what data does exist shows that there's a positive correlation between positive views of Russia, China, and the United States among the African public, which is to say if people like the idea of outside powers helping at all, they tend to like all of them. And what you can take from this is that the Africans themselves are, willing to do business with anyone. And, there's not actually anything wrong with the Americans, the Russians, and the Chinese all bidding on, building a road or something and then going with the person that wins the bid, like any other normal thing you would do. It's
and in fact, the competition is good for Africans because
for everyone. Yeah.
There's not a lot of like in those situations, one of the biggest issues comes from like them not having leverage once this happens and they're relying on the investment. I think that's my perception, at least.
Yeah, and it varies. Like, usually the way that this works is that the foreign company puts up most of the money for, if it's a dam and it generates electricity, or the government's supposed to pay them over time, or any number of things like that. And it's fine. They desperately need more foreign direct investment from like private companies and stuff like that, and industrialization. There's a lot of challenges, but I don't know that I see many people who seem to genuinely believe that the U.S. should be more involved in Africa, more so than going around to a few places and giving lip service, or expressing anxiety about the Chinese presence, or especially Wagner. It's much more about Russian presence on the continent, but no one's there's very little desire or willingness to actually provide the services that those countries are providing. So I don't know how you counter them unless you offer to do the things that they're doing.
Yeah. And there's a lot of problems. That could be a whole nother episode, but there's a lot of problems with specifically the Chinese intervention in these places. My understanding of it is,
I just need to respond to this. I have seen the Eric Prince talking about how you need to like recolonize Africa, and people that are allegedly, I don't know, people that are allegedly not of such political views, like, oh, this guy is totally right. He knows what's going on. It's like, he's just a mercenary trying to get people to pay him.
Yeah, there's clearly a incentive there for him to be talking about that. Eric Prince follows me on Twitter, by the way.
That's weird.
I know. I didn't know that he followed me. And then during 5 till midnight one night, somebody brought it up to me while I was, by the way, wearing skivvies and a crop top, mowing the lawn at 9 p.m. as a joke, because that's what 5 till midnight is. But yes, that's what we're talking about. All right. Anything else before we go? They know where to find you on Twitter, Wayward Rabbler, as well as on Substack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
No, I think that's all great.
All right. So at the end here, if anyone's still listening, if you want to go watch something else, my friend and somebody who's appeared on the podcast before, Daniela Pensac, is live on Rumble right now. So I'm actually going to hop over to her Rumble to watch this, and I recommend if you want to watch something else, go and do that. It's a little hard to find. I don't think I can link it specifically in the chat. I'm going to give it a try. I commented the link. I don't know if you can do anything like that, but head over there if you want to, and let her know and say hi. She's talking about Nick Fuentes right now, who is somebody that both me and Daniela are not entirely fond of. I think he's a interesting character, but I don't have a entirely positive view of him, even though I don't really have the full picture. And I disagree with him being deplatformed and everything, but I don't personally like him very much. The link works. Okay, so head over to Daniela at this point. If you want, I would appreciate it. I think she's great. Yeah, and other than that, thank you so much for coming. And everybody, please follow Brad Pearce, and we'll have you on again. You're now tied again for the most common guest on the Illegitimate Scholar.
Right,
I'll probably put this up on
again.
audio as well.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Later, everybody.
Bye.